but I've never actually been able to give my story to people who know where I'm coming from and who like share the same experience and have been through it or are going through it now. So this is going to be different. And I don't have to like explain to you what evangelical means or
Right.
like basic
Right.
Christian terminology. So that's going to be kind of neat for me.
That's so cool. That's so cool.
I wanted to talk about your thing, what you have going on, because my journey began like over 15 years ago.
Okay.
And at that time, there was nothing like what you've got now. There was nothing, there was no Tanakh talk or Nativ Center. And so for me, it was a very isolated, alone feeling. I can't even imagine going through this with all of the resources that you've put out there now. And I really hope your listeners appreciate everything, because to have the sense of community that you've put together and all of the resources and the rabbis that you have that are so accessible, that's really, really special. And I hope they appreciate it and realize what a blessing it is that you've created this. It's really amazing.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. That means a lot, actually. Had me teary eyed there for a minute, so I'm not used to that. So, yeah, very good. I appreciate that. Now, this show's about you, young lady.
Okay,
All
let's
right,
do
here
it.
from here on, it's all
I'm
you,
ready.
girl. Okay, so tell us a little bit about your past. Do you have any in your family bloodline, any teachers, preachers, anything like that?
Well, besides myself, it's my father. He was an ordained minister originally through the Assemblies of God, until he divorced, which is a big no-no. Then he went and became ordained as a non-denominational minister, which most of your listeners probably know is very denominational. Um,
Yeah.
and then, um, and then, as a child of divorce, I went back and forth between the homes. So, with my father was a evangelical Assemblies of God. My mother joined when I was 2 or 3 years old. Uh, Messianic. It was Assemblies of God. Started out Assemblies of God, but then it went into Hebrew roots and Messianic, which is where I learned all of the Jewish traditions. And she was the secretary, and she was a single mom. So the pastor of that church really took on the role of a father to me. So besides
Right.
my father, the minister, um, the pastor of my mother's church became like a father to me, who I refer to as my pastor.
Oh wow, gotcha. Very good, very good. So moving forward, when do you first recall as a youth or as a young adult where you think you really had your first God experience, meaning the thing that made you really go, oh wow, God is real, wow, and how what was that all about? How did that happen? For me, for example,
Um,
for me it was just an emotional experience when I was very very young, and I remember it to this day like it happened yesterday. Just to give you an example.
right. I I I don't have a profound experience of finding Jesus moment. Christianity wasn't really a choice. It was something I was born into, and I just always felt connected. There was never, ever a question, a doubt. There was never any time that I felt like now's the moment. It was just always there. In fact, my mother likes to tell people that I was speaking in tongues before I could walk. She describes how I would go banging up and down the hallway in my walker with my hands raised and screaming gibberish at the top of my lungs. Of course, I was imitating my father, who did exactly that. That's how he prayed up and down the hallways. Um,
That's funny.
and growing up, I wasn't the rebellious type. I was a goody goody preacher's kid, and I always wanted nothing more than to be a good Christian and to follow whatever path God had planned for me. So there wasn't really a profound experience that brought me to that. It was just always there.
Wow, very cool. Very cool. Okay, okay, good. Okay, question three: at what age did you consider actually becoming a teacher of the New Testament?
Um, well, as a preacher's kid, when the doors of the church are open, you are there. And whether that's services, prayer meetings, missionettes, which is like Christian Girl Scouts, there's choir, whatever it is, you're involved. And I was involved in all of it. So that also, I don't think I ever pursued it. It was just something that I fell into. And as the oldest child of a preacher, and taking those roles just automatically, it was expected. So and I loved it. I don't something about me. I don't do anything halfway. I always go all in. Some would say obsessively. I say passionately. As a teenager, that became I was very focused on witnessing to my peers, and I was good at it. I had no problem sharing my faith with kids at school. My father would be invited as a guest lecturer or a speaker at different churches, and he would speak to the main congregation, and I would speak to the youth. And what I spoke about was how to start Christian student unions in their schools, how to create Christian clubs, and how to share Jesus with their peers and invite other teenagers to church meetings. So I guess it really started when I was a teenager. I think I stepped away when I started to have children, but then as an adult, I got more into the Jewish roots and the Messianic movement, and of course, I always felt like there was a call to the ministry, and it just was. It was the direction that my life always took, but it was different when we get involved into the Hebrew roots and the Messianic movement, because there, as you know, there's a tremendous focus on converting Jews. It's all about evangelizing the Jewish people, which I was trained very young to be a missionary to my peers, and it was very easy to say, yeah, everybody is with sin, and the only way to get forgiveness of sin is Jesus. But I found it very different. You had to almost retrain and learn a whole new technique to convert Jews, because it was a totally different thing. So that was what I started to do as an adult.
Okay, so let's just
So
hope.
I guess the point is, it was just always. So I started as
Right.
a teenager, and then as an adult, it just focused more towards the Jewish people.
Okay, very good. Good question. Good answers. I was the same way. I mean, I was. A lot of people said, "You got a big mouth," and I'm like, "No, I just like to talk a lot." And so everybody tells me, I've never met a stranger, because like it didn't matter if I saw somebody for the first time in a restaurant, I would just go, "Hey, man, how are you doing?" I was always real. I don't know. It was just really easy to connect with people. So witnessing was a very huge part of my walk as well back then. So. Okay, let's see what we got. All right. What do you think the very first topic was where you saw a possible problem with the inerrancy, of the New Testament?
That took quite a while. I had absolutely no doubt that Christianity was the only way. It was the truth. It was the only way I could live my life, and I had absolutely no doubt. And it was just, originally, it was just about retraining myself as a missionary, because my focus had to be towards the Jewish people now, and that was totally different. And the only way to be a missionary to the Jewish people was to learn all of the prophecies. So I happen to have a knack for memorization. So I got that prophecy edition Bible,
Okay.
and they have it all charted out. They have the Old Testament prophecy and the New Testament fulfillment. So I went verse by verse, memorizing every prophecy
Wow.
and how it was fulfilled. And when you go verse by verse like that, it becomes more clear than ever. Absolutely. How can the Jews possibly reject this? Because there's no doubt that Jesus fulfilled everything, every single one of these prophecies. And it just reaffirmed my faith at first.
And of course, this book was written by Christian authors, obviously.
Right, for sure.
So they told you exactly what the scripture was and how to interpret it. Basically, they told
Right,
you
I
what it meant.
went through.
Right.
I memorized each verse and which prophecy it fulfilled, and it all lined up, and it was perfect, and I had no questions. And I was convinced that the only reason any Jew would reject this is because they simply refuse to look at it. And if I could
Blinded.
just get them to look at it, that they would see it just as clearly as I did. So that was what I did. Unfortunately, it worked, and I was pretty good at it with some of the less educated secular Jews that weren't so affiliated. They did become Christians, which I regret that very much.
Right.
But my problem came about when I would encounter Orthodox Jews or more educated, or ones
good.
that had a good religious background.
I want you to continue
they
on.
loved when I came around.
I want you to continue telling
say?
the story. I want you to continue telling this very part of the story, but I'm going to insert a question for you to blend in there with it. From the first time that you really got saved, whatever age, until the time where you started seeing problems with these rabbis, with people who were actually educated, roughly how much time span did you spend in Christianity? So, and then, yep, go ahead.
In Christian, I was 28 when I left, so 28 years.
Gotcha. Yeah, because you were in it from birth. That's right. That's a good point. Okay, so tell us, continue now. When you encountered these rabbis or these people who were educated Jews, that's when you started
religious
seeing
Jews.
religious Jews.
I would encounter religious Jews, and
Okay.
they loved it. They were like,
Of course.
probably like after everything you've learned now, and you get a Jehovah's Witness coming to your door. Some people get so excited and they're ready to take it on. That's how these Orthodox Jews would act every time I come around. They were like ready to taunt me. They were ready, and it was horrific. But then I thought, I'm doing this for a purpose. Yeah, I would do it, and I would take on all of their taunting and.
Do you remember the first time that you did that, and do you remember what you discussed with them and how you felt about their answer? Or any, for that matter.
They seemed to be ready for me, and that surprised me. It was like they knew what was coming, and they knew what to throw back at me. And what they threw back at me was the surrounding verses or the chapter, or that it was out, and I thought that was ridiculous. They'd tell me that it was taken out of context, that it was mistranslated, or whatever. I said, they clearly don't know, and they're just regurgitating what they've been told. But I said, I just somehow have to get them to look at it the way I look at it, and they'll see. So, and I guess that's where my idea was, I said, I clearly don't know it as well as I should.
Okay.
And when they would I think if you watch some of the videos, the counter missionaries, when they say Isaiah 53, and then Tovia will tell somebody, but what does Isaiah 52 say? And of course, we don't.
Knows, right?
The Christian doesn't know. So I said, I clearly have to go back and learn a whole lot more. I have to not memorize just the verse. I have to know every verse around it. I have to know the whole chapter. I have to know the whole book if I have to,
right.
and I'm going to do that. So I went back to do that in order to be able to counter these Orthodox Jews, and I felt so stupid. I was reading the whole chapter or the whole book, and then everything kind of fell apart and just didn't make sense at all, and I had no idea why. I felt like an idiot. I went to my pastors. I went to the people. I was in a training group to learn, and I kept asking the question. I said, but it doesn't make sense anymore. It made sense before. It was so clear before, and now it's not. And you get the normal answers that you get. And
that's insane.
Anyway, my idea was, okay, they clearly have armed themselves with responses, and they're getting those responses from somewhere. So I'm going to, if it doesn't make sense to me and I can't counter them that way, I think I can debate. And if I learn and I'm ready with their answers, then I can do it that way. So I went to go learn the Jewish response to Christian missionaries. And I Googled it, and I found
Sid Roth,
Judaism's
probably.
response to Christian missionaries.
Right.
And then I started studying the counter missionary side, and that's when everything really fell apart.
Nice. So
Because
did you actually? How long have you lived in Israel? I'm curious because you said that you began reaching out specifically to these educated Jews. Were you living in a Jewish community? Where were you, and how did you have access to that many Jewish people, so to speak?
I was in Houston, Texas,
Ah,
and the messianic movement is very involved in the Jewish community there.
I see.
Um, in fact, we were encouraged to be the greeters at any events that were taking place at the JCC, and always trying to insert ourselves. It was friendship evangelism. I think
Right.
Stuart Federer talks about it all the time. I was around Rabbi Federer a lot in Houston also. And you're told to latch on to the Jewish community, and through friendship and just being there and being seen and having credibility within the community, you have connections there. Of course, I would try to speak to some of my Orthodox friends, and I'd say, "Hey, I'm going through Burger King. Can I get you something?"
That's funny.
They'd say that's not kosher. I said,
Right.
I was going to get it without cheese. It's fine.
That's awesome.
Because to me,
Oh, wow.
I felt I was keeping biblical kosher, and it was the same, and I really had no idea what I was doing.
Gotcha. So just in a short answer, I think you probably covered it, but just to point it out there again. So from the first time you noticed the first problem with this rabbi or with this educated Jew, until the time you left the New Testament behind completely, roughly how much time did you stay in the New Testament while questioning it or studying it out? How long did it take you to get out? It took me like 3 years.
Um, I don't think it was so long, because when it fell apart, it really, really fell apart. And I don't do anything halfway, so I wasn't just listening to a thing here and there. I didn't sleep for weeks.
Wow.
Those the audio series that was out that I was listening to. It was all day, every day, and looking up everything. I did pretend for a while with my family that I was still in the church, but I stopped going to the church, and then I started going to a synagogue, and I told my family that this is how I reach Jews, and
Right.
nothing was different. But it was weeks of nonstop studying obsessively. It was a real crisis. Because when your world is when Jesus and Christianity is the center of your whole world, that's your core of your entire being. And when that fell apart, my whole life was spinning out of control, and there was no way I could sleep or focus on anything else or pretend anything. I had to figure this out.
That is really, really intense. I mean, I'm glad to see that you really went through so much extreme measures to get to try to save the Jewish people. I mean, now granted, we don't like the outcome of a lot of that, because that's just something that happens whenever you're stuck in Christianity. You witness and you draw people to their Jesus, and you can't really undo that. But I'm so glad and so happy for you. The way you came out, that's just insane. I would have loved to have taken that path. I kind of did. This isn't my testimony, but I had one interaction with Rabbi Eli Cohen from Jews for Judaism, friend of
Fun.
Michael. Yeah, and it was funny. I was trying hard with this guy, and man, and I just knew he just had no clue what he was talking about. Finally, 2 or 3 years later, I'm reacting again. I actually have him on the show, and I told him about that time. And I don't know if he remembered or if he was just humoring me, but he definitely
I can imagine that.
he could definitely appreciate the sentiment for sure. Okay, so all right, let's see where we're at. The sixth. Okay.
There was a period that I just gave up on God altogether, and I decided, fine, okay, there is no Jesus. He doesn't exist. But that means there's no God. And then my life had fallen apart. You have no community, you have no family, you have everybody rejects you. There's no purpose. You don't have anywhere to go to, because everything you went to was affiliated with Christianity and the church, and every person you're in contact with was affiliated with that. You just suddenly have no purpose and no life anymore. And that's a very emotional and low place to be. It was a little dangerous for me.
Right.
And I remember crying out in such horrific pain, and just crying out, and I cried out to God, and then I got so angry I threw my pillow and said, "You don't even exist." And it was like every stage of grief. It was anger, it was intense sadness, it was hopelessness, it was horrific. And I think that didn't turn around until I actually spoke to the rabbi, and he said, your problem is that you don't understand that Hashem is still there for you. Just because you've discovered that Jesus isn't the Messiah, and you haven't figured out how to place him, but God is very much still there for you. And that was it for me, because I realized I had never separated God from Jesus. Even though we believed in the Trinity at the time, it was all the same. It was all one. One doesn't exist without the other.
Right, that makes perfect sense.
But somehow it got through to me that I could let go of Jesus, and God was still there for me. And then that made all the difference in the world. And I started to turn around and had God and spirituality back in my life. And then I had purpose again, and I just knew I needed to continue learning and taking this direction and figuring out where I'm going with my life.
Wow.
But not easy, very emotional.
Right. Golly, I couldn't even imagine. What would you do? What would you tell a pastor or a preacher who sees this video and they say, well, she must have never really known Jesus to begin with? What would you tell them? I'd
say that that's a cop-out.
Nice.
And that is, even within Christianity, we said that to each other. We if you'd say Catholics did this to the Jewish people. You say, well, they weren't really Christians, and the Baptists, because they don't believe this, they're not really Christians. We use that to each other just to justify ourselves being right and the other person being wrong. It's just there's nothing, no basis to it.
Yeah, cop out.
Makes no sense.
That's a really good answer. I mean, damage control, cop out, big time. Because I used to get that a lot. In fact, I still get it from time to time from old friends who are just now finding out that I've been long gone, and they're like, "Oh, he must have never experienced the real Jesus." And I'm like, So now there's multiple Jesuses.
It's just as much impact as you lack faith.
Right. It is.
That was always offensive to me. I would go with sincere questions, and I had learned everything I could learn. I memorized everything. How dare you tell me that I lack faith?
Right.
I live and breathe my faith. I don't lack faith. I'm not understanding something right now, but don't tell me I lack faith. I guess that's what I would tell them.
Yeah, you were definitely not a C&E Christian, Christmas and Easter type of a person. You were like every day. Day in, day out.
All day, every day.
Right,
It was the only thing. I lived and breathed it.
Right. Did you have access to? I'm throwing this in there because I was just curious myself. Did you have access to the Hebrew, or did you come to the knowledge of all this stuff just by reading it in the English? Because for me, I didn't even know Hebrew at all until I saw the problems, and I was like, oh my God, this is horrible. I got to find out what it really says. And then I started studying Hebrew. Did you have access to the Hebrew then, or did you learn this also through just like the KJV or whatever the English translations? How'd that work?
No, for sure, I am Hebrew challenged. I've been here in Israel for 5 years now.
Gotcha.
I'm still very Hebrew challenged.
Gotcha.
But I did learn some of the Hebrew through the Messianic movement, and of course they insert Jesus into everything that's Hebrew. But then I would learn I would learn like the words that were mistranslated. And they're clearly mistranslated. But as far as learning the Hebrew language and being able to read the text in Hebrew, now I've not accomplished that. But thank God we have Art Scroll
Right.
and
Right.
so many dependable resources that are in English.
Right.
One day I do hope to be able to read and understand the Hebrew originally, because we all should. That is the only way it should be learned.
Do you have a favorite now? Do you have a favorite? Because I have a handful myself. Do you have a favorite verse or a few verses that are from the Tanakh that you use as a first response to people sometimes, if you have the opportunity?
I think the first ones that I learned, the ones that made the most impact to me, I assume would have the most impact to others. So those are the ones that I use. There's one in Matthew. He says, out of Egypt.
Right. Yep. I've called my son.
Out of Egypt, I called my son.
Right.
And then in the
Exodus.
Christian Study Bible, if you tell them to look it up in the Christian Bible, because that's what they depend on. In the Christian Study Bible, it tells you where I believe it's Hosea, where to look for. And then they go to that, and it clearly says it was Israel.
Right.
Not,
right. Nice.
Yeah, and it was Israel. I called Israel out of Egypt. It was talking about the Exodus. So it was clearly taken out of a context and with an agenda. And then there is the Koari, the Psalm,
Right.
which says the company of evildoers have surrounded me, and
Right.
like lion, they're at my hands and my feet. They pierced my hands and my feet.
Right.
To show that pierced isn't referred to in that way anywhere else, and then it's only there that. So I think.
So to clarify for the
pointing
viewer,
out to people that there's a clear agenda with that mistranslation. So there's no other reason it would be mistranslated other than to make it appear that way. Those are just a couple that are like just.
Those are really good
clear
ones. Yeah, for sure. And so to clarify for the viewers who are maybe Hebrew challenged as well, the Ka'ari word, they would say that was pierced, but it actually Ka'ari would be like as a lion in actual Hebrew. And so basically they took that word and either accidentally mistranslated it or sorry, I don't mean to chuckle.
Right.
I was there myself. I spent a lot of time like witnessing to people and trying to even convince Jewish people as well that they're so blind and they got a veil of whatever the case may be. And so when I chuckle because of my own personal ignorance at the time. So it's interesting to see all these things. There's so many mistranslations that really have really got most Christians like anchored down. They really depend on their English.
But that one, when you read it, just that one verse with the word pierced in there, absolutely, that reaffirms your faith, and that is totally Jesus. That's Jesus described there. There's no doubt there.
Absolutely.
But even not being mistranslated, if you were to go and read the whole chapter and understand what David was going through and how he describes his enemies as animals and dogs and lions, all throughout the whole time he was running and being chased after. Right.
There's not even any contextual reasoning for having they pierced my hands and my feet. It just makes no sense for him to say that at all. And that's right. That's a really great point. Wow. Well, I tell you what, girl, that was really deep. That was really awesome. And we'll go to wrap this up now. But do you have any final words for maybe some people who are watching this now who may think that you, the same thing, you already answered the question, but may think you never knew Jesus to begin with, and like, well, if they're starting to question things now, like, wow, maybe she's got something into this thing, what would be your next advice for them for their next step?
That's something I struggle with, because I think we haven't even discussed the reaction of family and friends. But
you know
sure
what? I don't want that.
And you yourself.
No, I'm sorry. I did skip that one. I didn't see that one there. I must have scanned past it. I definitely want you to tell me about that. Do you have time?
I have I have time.
Yes, please do that. That's very huge. I mean, a lot of people struggle with that themselves, and hearing other people's stories, it really helps them kind of work through things. So tell us how you handled this whole thing with telling your family and experiences you went through, and how you think you finally resolved it, a peaceful resolution between them.
At first, I pretended. I hid everything. Um, I had actually started the conversion process and didn't tell my family at all. And when they would come visit, I would turn all of the books backward. I would hide the stuff that I was studying. Anything that was Hebrew, I would hide it and make sure it wasn't visible. And I really thought that my mother, because she was in the Messianic movement and understood the Hebrew traditions and the holidays, that she might be a little bit more understanding, and that my father, who was the uh, straight evangelical, that he would be more difficult. Um, but it was actually the opposite. My father also happens to be he was a sheriff's deputy in Houston, and he was a detective. Um, he called me one night. I was at a conservative synagogue on Friday night, and said that he needed to be in my area that night, and he was going to come stay the night. And I panicked because, like I said, I was obsessive
Right.
day and
Wow.
night studying this. I left every bit of my study materials on the table. Everything was out. I didn't put anything away, and he was going to be there before I was. So I was terrified, and when
Wow.
I walked into the door, and I felt like a 5-year-old child that was about to get a big lecture. I'd been caught. Um,
Wow.
and he came and he said, "Sit down." And he says, I looked at what you've been looking at. You've changed the way you dress. You've changed the way you eat, your habits. I know exactly what's happening here. I'm a detective.
Mm,
You're getting involved in a cult, and
mm, mm, mm,
we need
mm.
to learn together. And I need to pull you back. And I said, great, because I have lots of questions.
That's
I've been
awesome.
hiding
Great
this
response.
for a
Wow.
long time. And there's a lot of stuff that I'm looking at that I just cannot believe. And if you would look at it, maybe you can pull me back. And he agreed to, and we agreed not to discuss it again until he had really looked into the stuff. He spent the night that night, and I didn't sleep.
Mm.
I was in my room, like, wide awake, going, "Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God." And I could hear him in the other room listening to the same series that I had been listening to. And he was
Wow.
up all night long listening to it. And at 3 o'clock in the morning, he came and knocked on my door and said, "You awake?" And I said, "Yep." And he came in and he sat at the edge of my bed in this catatonic state, and he just like sat there staring. I said, "What's up?" And he said, "He's right. He's right about everything."
What? Are you serious?
That I
Wow.
said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Everything." He said, I took my Bible. I was going verse by verse. I was going to rip him apart, but he's right about everything. The Jews are right. He's like, the rug was ripped out from under him, just as it was from me.
Unbelievable.
And
Wow. In one
yeah,
night. In one night. Oh,
I started tearing up a little bit, going, "Oh my gosh." And he looked at me and said, "Now what do we do?" I said, That's
that
where I'm
is
at."
amazing. Unbelievable.
My mother, on the other hand, was a little more difficult, and um, she's was not so accepting, because when you're in Christianity, um, you're going to go to hell if you reject Jesus. And for her, um, I was going to hell, and I was taking her grandchildren with me, and that's not something she could accept.
That is so deep. Hmm.
That rips your heart out. And it wasn't anything mean. And I know a lot of people have said it's not you, it's her, but it is.
Hmm.
When you make a decision like this, you send a bomb into the
Hmm.
middle of your family,
Hmm.
and it isn't just your choice. It affects everybody around you, because you used to get together for family get-togethers. You'd have Thanksgiving dinner, you'd have Christmas, you'd meet for coffee. Everything you do as a family is affected when you make this decision. So it wasn't just her. It really it tears a family apart.
Wow. That is so intense. Oh my gosh. I
Just
have.
friends the same way. You have friends that that you try to explain this to, and they of course don't understand. And at first, I had told friends that we can still get together for coffee. You can still come to my house, and you can go to church and then come after, and we can like hang out together. I'll go to your house. And at first they said, yeah, okay, and they were accepting. But then I guess the pastor of the church went around with there's a couple of scriptures in First John. This is somebody who denies Christ is the Antichrist.
Hmm.
So I became labeled the Antichrist. And then there's another one that one who rejects Christ, you should not allow them in your home.
Oh
You
yeah, that was
shouldn't
Paul.
invite them
Hmm.
home or to sit at your table.
Even have a meal with them, right?
So I was the enemy. I was the Antichrist, and they were not allowed to let me into their home, which that hurt a lot because I
Hmm.
had like very close friends who then had a wedding I wasn't invited to.
Hmm.
That rips your guts out.
Wow, that is horrible. I know it's, and the thing that I found peace in that experience with me as well was that Paul did instruct them. It was an instruction: don't even have a meal with them. So they're literally just following after Paul's advice, and so
Right.
I found a little bit of peace in that, and just said maybe one of these days they'll come out of it. Wow, that is so cool. Okay, so now, the question I was trying to project to, we almost skipped this one. I'm glad we did not. That was, oh my God, that was such a rich part of this testimony. Wow, thank you for going into that. So your advice now for anybody who has stumbled across something troubling about their New Testament.
It's a big deal, and it is not easy. And make sure you're ready to fully commit to it, because it changes your whole life. I have friends that I care very, very much about that are in Christianity, and I know they have it's a couple with children, and one of the spouses is looking into it and would ask questions, and I'm not so sure that if they took that path that they would do it together, and it may rip up their whole family. And it's I struggle with that all the time.
Hmm.
Do you lead them down this path, and do you answer the questions they want, even knowing that it might create such damage? I know some rabbis would say yes, they deserve to know the truth no matter what, that they deserve to worship Hashem
Right.
just as we do, and to find that. But it's difficult,
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
a moral, ethical decision that I have to
Right.
like struggle with. And
Right. Wow, that's tough.
but as far as I took the conversion route, because it is very difficult when you come from Christianity and you have such a strong community and feeling of family and a support system, and you have purpose in your life. When you leave Christianity, the emptiness that follows is difficult. And I don't envy the position of a lot of your listeners are in, and
Right.
the
Right.
Noahide. There's so much out there for the Noahide movement now, but it's still not completely clear, because it's difficult to go to, okay, now you just study 7 laws,
Hmm.
and you have no community, and you have no support, and you have no anything else. This is all you have. That's hard
Hmm.
to go to. And I do notice that a lot of the Noahide movement starts to kind of create sort of a their own religion around it, because the dogma and doctrine of Christianity is comfortable. It's hard not to go down that route, because you need to form some sort of something for your life.
Right.
I had children, so I really felt that they needed the community and the education and the support system, and ended up going through the conversion process. I don't envy the position that a lot of the Noahide movement is in.
Mm-hmm.
Thank God it's growing, and there's a lot becoming available now. But it's not an easy place to be, especially coming from what we came from, Christianity. It's hard to go to nothing.
That is so true. That is so true. Well, we'll go ahead and wrap up this now. But before we leave, one final word from you. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing now in Israel, and why you moved to Israel. When did you move to Israel? Real quick on summary on that, if you don't mind.
Okay, while I was in Houston, you're in Texas. You probably know Texas is a hotbed for missionary organizations. A lot of the organizations that are operating here in Israel are headquartered in Texas, and I happen to have been affiliated and worked with many of them. So when I came to Judaism, I joined a organization called Jewish Israel, and it was exposing the agenda of missionaries that were operating in Israel, pretending that they were not out to convert Jews. But of course, I was working with them in Houston. I knew very much that they were. So I would provide information to the organization, because when a missionary is working in Israel, they'll say one thing to the Jews, but then when they're fundraising in Houston, Texas, in one of the churches, their mask comes off, and they talk about how many Jews they reached and how they're doing it, and what their technique is, and they show videos, and they tell you stories of testimonies of people who have accepted Jesus, and that is what the Jews don't see, and they form partnerships and relationships with them, and then they give them a foothold in Israel, not knowing that was what their true agenda is. So that's what I did when I was in Houston, which is any Noahide out there that would like to do the same. That information is definitely needed all the time. And then when I came here, it's been more and more I think you see it all the time. The evangelicals are fully embracing the Jewish people, which is awesome on one side, but for us who know that it doesn't come without strings attached, and that there very much is an agenda, it's dangerous. So explaining that danger to the Jewish people is important, and that's something I do, and Gabrielle Sanders, who you also have. We can speak from I've been there, I've done that. I know what I'm talking about. This is what I did, and this is how I did it, and this is what this organization does, and this is what they believe. So explaining, because the Jews don't need to learn the New Testament and all of Christian theology and what the different denominations believe. The fundamental belief of Christianity is that you have to convert everybody, and Jews most important. But that's so. Going in and telling them I've been there, I've done that, and I know, and this is what this is about, and then rabbis can speak for the Jewish part of that. But that's what I do here in Israel, is speaking to Rabbanim and Jewish organizations that are thinking about or have already partnered with evangelical Christians and have a foothold and are direct providers of a lot of things here in Israel.
Very nice. Shannon, it's been such a pleasure having you on. What a wonderful testimony. I'm so glad you were able to share that with us. Thank you very much. And so, people, thank you for tuning in.
Thank you.
Awesome. Oh, that's really loud. Holy cow. That scared me. So I'm going to put on your screen, guys, for just a moment. There's some 4 counter-missionary books out there that you've got to have. They're really, really great. On the screen, you'll see Judaism and Christianity, A Contrast by Rabbi Stuart Federow, Revealing Matthew's Secrets by a good friend, Jason LaCrosse. Rabbi Federow is also a dear friend. All these people are really good friends of ours. Leaving Jesus by James Wood Jr., amazing little stick of dynamite. And, of course, you've got the Borderline Encyclopedia from Rabbi Tovia Singer. Let's Get Biblical, 2-volume book set. The audio files are available, CDs are not. Go to outreachjudaism.org, and you can find those audio files in the free audio section at his website. So until later, guys, I hope you guys have a wonderful week, and look forward to seeing you guys on the next show, which is going to be happening here in just a few more hours. Sit tight, and I'll see you soon. Take care. Shalom, shalom, everybody.